With Congressman Peter King's congressional investigations into the so-called threats posed by American Muslim communities, Republican state lawmakers trying to ban the practice of Sharia law, and more resistance to new mosques in America, and now 3 wars being waged in predominantly Muslim countries, there's a lot of resistance on the right to giving Muslims a seat at the table in America. In Europe as well, this is happening, where France, Italy, and Belgium have outlawed certain types of Islamic dress. There are questions as to whether or not Muslims can successfully assimilate into Western culture, or at least those questions are being put out. But are these fair questions? Is assuming that Muslims cannot break away from the Quran to live in a secular Western nation a form of prejudice? Here to tackle this issue, Dr. Robert Greer, theologian and author of the new book, Quran Revealed, A Christian Critique, and Alejandro Butel, government and policy analyst with the Muslim Public Affairs Council. Dr. Greer, Alejandro, both of you, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Greer, first of all, what do you have against Peter Salim from Framingham, Massachusetts? He was a Revolutionary War hero, decorated, fought in June 1775 in the Battle of Bunker Hill, later fought in the Battle of Saratoga, had a private audience with George Washington for his bravery. He was a Muslim.
I have nothing wrong with that. That's great. I think that what he did was fine.
He's one of many. There's another, Yusuf Ben Ali. He couldn't possibly be loyal to America, right? He fought with General Sumter in South Carolina and the Continental Troops from 1775 to 1783. Or Alex Haley, the guy who wrote Roots, which is the story of his ancestor, Kunti Kinte. He was born a Muslim in 1750, captured, enslaved, brought to Annapolis, Maryland in 1767, and forced to give up his Islamic faith. How would you feel about being forced to give up your faith, sir?
I would feel very bad about that, of course, and I think if the argument you're trying to make is that we have patriotic Muslims in the United States of America.
Since before we were a country, yes, sir, that's the argument I'm making.
Mm-hmm. The answer is clearly yes.
Okay, so then why are you suggesting that Muslims are not capable of integrating themselves into Western society?
They are. I'm not suggesting that they're not. What I am suggesting is if a Muslim is committed to the Quran and reads it, I would say cover to cover, understands the Quran and believes it to be a divinely inspired document, that they're going to have difficulties with democracy. And they're going to have problems assimilating because you have two completely separate worldviews in conflict with one another.
Sir, I have to say, it may sound, well, whatever. I have literally read the Old and New Testament, the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, 4 times in my life. Over a 4-year period, okay. I did this, one of these, read it before you, it's how I put myself to sleep at night. I'm a lousy sleeper. And I can tell you, if you're a practicing Jew or Christian according to particularly Deuteronomy and arguably Exodus, you also have a problem, and certainly many of Paul's letters, his letters to the Romans, for example, or the Ephesians, you have serious problems with Christianity because, thou shalt have no other God before me. I mean, Jesus saying, render unto Caesar what's Caesar's and render unto God what's God's. There were some very clear differentiations. Isn't it the same thing in Islam? Doesn't every religion assert its primacy?
No. With Christianity, you have the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament clearly taught theocracy that you're talking about.
The Old Testament is part of the Christian liturgy.
It is.
You've got in the United States right now, and all around the world for that matter, we have Christian sects. The most famous is probably the what do they call it? The Watchtower is their publication. The Jehovah's Witnesses, who refuse to register to vote because they think that makes God number 2.
Well, you want my opinion on the matter? The New Testament does not teach theocracy in that sense. Christians are waiting for the return of Jesus Christ, and then when he comes back, then you'll have the theocracy that you're talking about. In the interim, we are called upon to be salt and light in whatever culture we happen to be in, and to try to bring about a redeeming factor in all cultures.
So we're waiting for a theocracy. Dr. Greer, let me get Alejandro in here. Alejandro, American Muslims in Western countries, the whole issue of assimilation, your take on this, your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on.
It's an honor.
Second, I think the point that you're making, Tom, is very apt. Really, that anyone can take a particular verse out of any holy text and twist it and interpret it in any which way that they want. And so, for instance, I mean, Dr. Greer may believe that the Quran says certain things, but there are other scholars who have devoted their lives to this issue, who, for instance, look at particular verses such as 42:38, chapter 42, verse 38, which talks about the need for consultation in all governing affairs. And so that verse itself, many scholars have actually said, is a good basis for the moral principles that would find a democracy. But more broadly than that, though, is that aside from the issue of getting into the scriptural things, let's look at what the experts actually say when it comes to religion and political participation. A study recently done by a pair of researchers from the University of Washington and Harvard actually find that the more a Muslim American gets involved at their mosque, and the more that they become religiously literate, the more that they feel American, and the more encouraged that they become to participate in our democracy.
It's interesting because it's been my observation that having at one time in my life been very involved in fundamentalist Christianity and several other religions, actually. I kind of did a deli thing for a number of years there. That the people who are the most militant and aggressively evangelistic seem to be the ones who are the most uncertain about the details of their religion and insecure about it. It's almost like if I can convince 5 people, then it must be right. Right.
Yeah, you know, I mean, and this is the thing, is that, you know, there are different strands of Christianity. There are different strands of Islam, Judaism, a whole wide range of world religions out there. Yeah. Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever, what have you. Okay, but the point being is, again, is that you can interpret one's faith, one's religion in a number of different ways. The question is, are you going to be anchoring it towards specific moral values? And at the end of the day, our view is, as Muslim Americans and as Muslims in general, look at even the case of Egypt, what's going on there right now, or Turkey, or Indonesia, or Bangladesh. Those are countries right now where they are Muslim majority, and yet they have a strong and very clear commitment to the democratic systems that they hold.
To secular systems.
To a separation of religion and state.
Dr. Greer, to the extent that, in the minute we have left here, to the extent that you're waiting for the theocracy to come, for Jesus to return, what role does the presence of Muslims play in that, in your mind?
I believe that the Muslims are welcome to have their religion as they wish. They can, if they wish to be committed to their belief system, that's their decision to make. We as Christians, however, are waiting for Christ, and in the interim, we are reaching out to the Muslim community to show them the way to eternal life as we understand it. But the point I want to make, back to the original point, was that as the Quran is read, and in my book, The Quran Revealed presents the Quran in chronological order, it gives a sense of the continuity, the flow of the book, that you do see that it is a theocracy, and modern Muslims, the moderate Muslims of today, as this gentleman was speaking a moment ago, they're welcome to think and to believe and practice the religion as they wish, but as they do so, they are moving away from more of a tightly interpreted interpretation of the Quran.
Right. Now, ironically, you know, there's many of us who are arguing the same thing about Christianity.
Yeah, well,
Let's
with all
not
due
have
respect
radicals.
to the doctor, though, being that I am a practicing Muslim and live it every single day, I will certainly say, though, that I have to strongly disagree. And at the end of the day, I do believe that there are strong moral principles and foundations for democracy in there.
I don't disagree with you, and
just like any other faith.
Indeed. Thank you. And any other faith can be taken to extremes. Thank you both for being here.